could be 2 tomorrow, could be 1, could be 0. And I'm guided here by the great work by my very good friend and her team of CPI, and the recent report they did on adaptation, finance, the climate policy initiative with the Global Center on Adaptation, that I cited its figures at least 4 times so far from the beginning of the day, because it's very helpful to understand the overall ecosystem that we are dealing with. Global climate finance, I quote from your work, sorry, and I hope that I'm not stealing any of your important lines, but at least on the fact that they are shared with everyone. Good news, fantastic so far, 1.3 trillion annually instead of 653. This is comparing 21-22 to 2019-2020. Bad news that the share of adaptation had declined from 7%, as low as it was, to 5%. Why? There is interesting methodology behind that, and of course, I'm happy always to put Barbara under the spot, and she does great on that. She can explain why. But I can tell you something that we were exposed when we were in Kenya in September, and when we had an opportunity to discuss with heads of state attending, with Razan Mubarak moderating the GST on adaptation, and when we spoke about means of implementation, I was surprised that the focus was primarily by heads of state in areas related to mitigation, decarbonization, and cutting emissions. Of course, heads of states, they have their political views, but being in government before, that is trickled down, because these speeches are not written, perhaps with very few exceptions, by heads of state themselves. It's basically by the machinery producing these reports. Nothing against mitigation, definitely, and we know that we need to do much more. 3 times of investments are required in renewables. Great deal of efforts in decarbonization in the hard-to-abate sector. If we are doing well in mitigation, perhaps many of the aspects of work that we are engaged in adaptation wouldn't have even been needed, because that was the generous assumption of the past. Do better in decarbonization and cut emissions, you will be happy because you need to adapt. Now we're doing not that good in mitigation, we're ignoring adaptation, and that's why we're talking about the loss and damage. This could be a game changer. The creation of loss and damage, and we have one of the insurance gurus in the room, that can really get us another narrative. And instead of taking insurance as the last resort, is basically, yeah, when I say a guru, everybody's waving to Rowan, of course. But the issue here that we say, we're in a war, quoting the Secretary General, against climate change. Your first line of defense is mitigation. You fail, you have the second line of defense, adaptation. You fail, losses, damages, loss and damage. And here you get the insurance people as well to assess risk and to help you, especially if you are enterprises and business sector, to do better job. So that is going to be a game changer. And here is not just about the funds, and there will be many people just doing, and it's good that this fund is being hosted temporarily, at least, forever, not upset anyone, at the World Bank, until it is big enough to be standing on its own feet. But what I'm saying here, having this kind of big initiative, starting from Sharm Sheikh and delivered here, it was hard work by politicians, by business leaders, by technicians, until we got the loss and damage. And that was a practical answer to those who are saying, we attend from COP to COP and nothing happens. No, you are wrong in that one. Loss and damage was delivered, but now we need more funds to it. Another one, the $30 million that was initiated by the President of the UAE, His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Zayed. That was hard work that started and tested in Africa for 4.5 billion, and then his team worked hard. Government, leadership, with business, with think tanks, with researchers. Another one that I was very much in the middle of, and it's half adaptation, half mitigation, which is the Green Climate Fund. And while many people, including myself, are celebrating the fact after the announcement of yesterday by the US, now we have 29 participants with $12.470 billion of pledged finance. Whether that will be delivered or not, as I was telling the Secretary General, at my level I'm a facilitator of pledges. As a Secretary General, you can take care of making sure that none of these pledges are shady, as has been warning us. So the practical question back to it, as I was telling my good colleagues, and I'm here speaking under the good notes, but emphasizing the question. If we ask this question again, 3% or 5%, we're talking with the intelligent folks from UniteFI, and they have been doing great work in this area. Some of them said it could be partially an issue of taxonomy and definition, but because there could be already some investments in this area, especially by leading businesses. But with that 3%, if I'm fixing the taxonomy, will that be 3% or 5%? And I'm talking here about a growing pie, not a shrinking pie, that I'm not in competition with mitigation. We need mitigation to have it shared. Some people need to say double adaptation, others like Mohammed Nasser of Egypt, who is being very much instrumental in discussion, say no, doubling adaptation is not enough. Quadrupling it is the critical minimum, and perhaps this is being confirmed by independent research as well. But how to bridge it? This gets me into the very final thing, and coming from Africa, I'm happy to make this emphasis. Numbers, and again, Barbara is the master of these numbers and explaining them. But before her latest report, 11 billion delivered to Africa. 55 billion is based on the NDCs for Africa. This tells you that the NDCs are not comprehensive enough, not ambitious enough, not inclusive enough. They are not listening enough to those who are in villages, in cities, to businesses. And I think there could be as well some sort of self-trimming of some of the facts, because I was in government. I tell you, well, do the figures, but you are going to be responsible for 97% of whatever you're going to be putting the figure. The tendency in bureaucracy is not lie, say, well, just ration it and repress it. And then the independent research in the case of Africa is not 5 times more that we need based on the NDC. It's 10 times more based on the independent research by UNEP and others. So this is the issue that I like the leaders of business and leaders of thought to give us as climate champions, as members of the GFANs and others who are now keen to do more, and with our links, especially that we have great links now with the Green Climate Fund, with the SIFs, the two lady leaders, women leaders of these two organizations are very well known to us, and we can really provide help. And everybody's talking about the private sector, and unfortunately, with generous assumption about what the private sector can do, because many of these meetings, the private sector was not adequately represented. Here you are, and we are taking notes, and we're going after actions. So enlighten us. Thank you.
Dr. Mahmoud, thank you for those comments. And it's a